Welcome to How to Paladin. I'm Trinita. Oh fuck. I'm not calling it How to Paladin. Someone took that name. Welcome to Pallys and You. Here we'll be talking about different things paladins can do, such as healing, tanking, and DPS. For all those snickering in the background, paladins can do DPS. I myself am a DPS paladin. Note the executioner on my hammer. Now, paladins are a very essential class to most endgame raids, mostly because of their ability to buff and add different capabilities to the raid. You can always find a paladin doing something that'll help your raid, such as tanking or healing or DPS. Now, today we're going to be talking about essential paladin mods. Essential paladin mods can include many things from Pally Power to the standard raid mods like Deadly Boss and Omen. The first one I would like to talk about is Pally Power. If every paladin in your raid group has Pally Power, you can basically sort out your Pally buffs with no issues. It also does auto buffing and everything else if you need it. Of course, it won't auto buff right in the middle of combat, setting off your global cooldown. That would be horrible. But if you use Pally Power accordingly, you will find that you won't spend 10 minutes trying to sort out Pally buffs with all your other paladin friends in the raid group. Now, Omen is especially important for paladins because no matter what they're doing, they're generating threat. Now, sometimes they want threat if they're tanking, and sometimes they don't. Omen's essential for all raiding, really, but especially for things like paladins and other key classes. You can see your healing threat, you can see your tanking threat, and you can just see regular threat if you're DPSing. Most paladins do not exceed a tank's threat, just because of talents and our ability to reduce our own threat by a very large amount. Deadly Boss mods is also important, but that's not really an essential paladin mod as much as it is just an essential raid mod. Now, we're going to get into ret paladins. I know, ret paladins, tee-hee, retardants, no. The correct term for a paladin who is retribution spec is an Oradin. Oradins are very important. Everyone's like, oh, Oradins can't DPS even as good as an MS warrior. What's the point of them? Oh yeah, they add buffs, but we could get a heal it in or tank it in to do the same thing. Of course you can. And no, we don't do as much DPS as a MS warrior, usually. Trust me, I've out DPS'd MS warriors. It's not too hard with the right gear. Now, of course, I'm currently guildless because I'm trying to get into a certain guild, and, well, of course, they have an 18 plus restriction. Just so everyone knows, 18 plus restrictions are stupid. It's not about maturity. It's not about all that stuff. It's about we want to deny the kids the right to play the game too. And you know what, that's wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't even mean to say that. It's more about it really inhibits the ability to play for some people who may be under 18. I'm 16. And I can tell you right now, many people have complimented me on my maturity, and there are tons of people in that guild trying to get me in, even though I'm under 18. And they're talking with the leaders of the guild right now. Now, something I'd like to mention about getting back on track, of course. Something I'd really like to mention is Sanctity Aura. Now, everyone's like, oh, 10% holy damage, that's no good to anyone but the paladin. Well, you're wrong. There's talent points in our tree that allow us to give an extra 2% to all damage done while Sanctity Aura is on them. So that means you rogues, you hunters, you all those heavy DPS people, you're getting an extra 2% to that already heavy DPS. That may not be essential, but I can tell you right now, if I was some super hitting rogue or some ultimate BM DPS hunter, an extra 2%, that's a big number. It ends up adding up if you can keep your DPS up. Now, I'd also like to mention another talent. It allows us, it improves our Seal of the Crusader, or more or less our judgment, to add 3% crit to that target for the entire raid. So in other words, while you're targeting that target, you have 3% extra crit on him. It's like, ooh, 3% extra crit. Yeah, that makes a big difference, you know. If Ret Paladins juggle their Avenging Wrath and other things appropriately, it works out fairly nicely. Now, there are many different weapons and enchants a Ret Paladin can get. First of all, pre and post car gear for most Ret Paladins is not good, and not as good as the PvP gear. Everyone's like, oh, PvP, ew, that's not raiding gear. Well, for Ret Paladins, it more or less is. I can tell you right now, my Vengeful pieces have more than exceeded my Tier 4 pieces. I actually passed on my Tier 4 legs and my Tier 4 chest piece because I have Vengeful. And they're superior in stats in like every way. Now, if you're a tank, you don't really want the PvP gear. But if you're Ret like me, not much matches the overall balance of stats other than your raid gear, Tier 4 gear. As you can see, I'm wearing Tier 4 gloves, and they are better than my Gladiator gloves. For PvE raids. For PvP, I put my Gladiator gloves back on. Now, there's a few different enchants you can consider for your weapons, like, well, I have Executioner. You can get Savagery or Agility. Or even Mongoose if you felt like it. I know a couple paladins who've done that. Really, the most important part of DPSing for a paladin is to get your crit to about 25% and then stack strength. Now, why strength, you ask, instead of raw attack power? If you've spec'd for divine strength in your holy tree, all 5 points, 1 point of strength adds up to 2.2 attack power. And you can stack a whole bunch of that. So I go for strength enchants on my gear. I have strength enchant on my gloves, I have a strength enchant on my bracers. And the rest of my gear is PvP, so I have stamp stuff on it. That is more or less all I need to talk about for Pallys and You today. But please, please remember that Paladins are a most useful class in many ways, and Ret Paladins are nothing to be laughed at. We do essential DPS, we are great PvPers, and we add buffs to raids that can be a difference between downing a boss and not downing one. Hint, hint, 2% DPS, or 2% added damage and 3% crit. Yeah, so that's all for Pallys and You today. In Pallys and 2, episode 2, we're going to be talking to a friend of mine. His name is Algrave. Algrave is a holy paladin, and we're going to be discussing with him some of the holy paladin mods and holy paladin gear you should consider, along with tricks and tips for those paladins starting off down the holy tree. Thank you, and tune in next time for Pallys and You.